Now, Washington Mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. At AM 630. WMAL.
8:07 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. I'm Brian Wilson, filling in today for the vacationing Brian Neiman. Is our good friend Tori Clark. How are you, Tori?
I am doing well. Still awake.
Yeah, we've had a sort of an interesting perspective on the storm in that you have a generator but lost power in your neighborhood, and I kept power throughout, so I have a very good attitude about the storm. I certainly understand, though, the trauma it is to go through several days where the temperatures are reaching nearly 100 degrees.
There are thousands and thousands of people in this town with no help whatsoever. Our generator helps some, and we're very grateful for that, but so many people with no help at all.
Yeah, so
terribly for them.
Yeah, so hang in there. Just to recap, we've talked to Pepco, Dominion Power, and BG&E in the last few minutes, and they all basically are saying that it looks like we probably will not have full power restored until Thursday, Friday, or maybe even Saturday in some areas. So hang in there. It's going to take a lot of patience. Standing by on the line now, we're going to break away from our storm coverage for just a moment to talk to someone that I've been anxious to talk to for several days now when I heard he was going to be on the program. Senator Marco Rubio, Republican from Florida. Of course, a man who's very much in the news these days. We'll touch on that briefly. But also a man who's written a book called An American Son, a Memoir. Senator Rubio, thanks for joining us here on WMAL.
Thank you. I'm sorry for what you guys are going. We've been there and done that in South Florida, without power for a couple weeks. Luckily, you won't be gone that long.
You have some good advice for us? Because we're not handling it too well.
Yeah, Lee.
We don't handle many things well in D.C., but we're really not handling this well.
Oh, I know. Listen, you don't realize how important air conditioning and all these things are until you don't have it. And, the advice I always took, we went somewhere that had power.
All right.
Came back, but anyway.
I understand. Actually, your state is sending us some power crews to help us out. So
I know it's problematic.
So, Senator, let's talk very quickly about the Supreme Court decision which came down last week. The Supreme Court rules that indeed Obamacare is constitutional, but not for the reasons we thought it would be. They say it's because it's a tax. And yet this weekend, when questioned about it very sharply, Jack Lew from the White House simply said it's not a tax. A big argument ensued. How can you have it both ways? How can you go to the Supreme Court and argue at one point that it is a tax and now claim it's not a tax?
Well, you can't, and that's the problem with the case, is that it is a tax. I mean, that's the only reason why the court even found it's constitutional. Even that's a flimsy argument, in my opinion, but it's the one they're making, but it's really flimsy in my mind. I mean, based on the logic that they've created, the government can basically force you to do anything as long as they tax you for not doing it. There's nothing that Congress can't force you to do. And, of course, that's absurd. And so, anyway, I disagree with the Supreme Court's decision, but I respect it. And I would just say that one of the things the Supreme Court decide is whether it's a good idea or not. That belongs to us. And I think it's a terrible idea. And I think the main reason that people are going to figure out why it's a bad idea is because it's a middle-class tax increase. That's simple. People in the middle class will see a tax increase. They will owe the IRS money very soon unless they can afford to buy health insurance. It's a tax.
Hey, Senator, let me ask you a legal question, because you're trained as a legal beagle, and it seemed to me as though Chief Justice Roberts was looking for a way to make the mandate, the individual mandate, constitutional. Was that the court's responsibility with this case? I thought it was to look at the issue as it was presented to them, and was the mandate under the Commerce Clause constitutional or not? And instead, to me, it seemed as though they kind of went the extra mile and said, well, we're going to find a reason for this to be constitutional. I'm curious, I watch things like Law and Order on TV, and they don't use the Supreme Court too much, so I know nothing about this. But I was just curious as to whether or not that was an appropriate thing for the Supreme Court even to be doing.
Well, and I don't know that's what they were doing, but it isn't. I mean, their job is to rule whether a law passed by Congress is within the congressional powers that the Congress is given by the Constitution. I mean, that's it. And that's why he had to stretch and say, well, they do have the power to do this because it's a tax. Obviously, some of the justices, 4 of them, did not agree, and so it was that is not their job. I mean, and I'm not saying that's what they were doing, but if it was, they were supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I want to apologize. We're having a little bit of trouble with the Senator's phone connection there. But, Senator, as long as we still got you, let me ask a couple more questions. I know that you have not been willing to comment upon the speculation that you might make a good running mate for Mitt Romney, and I respect that. I've looked at your career, and I noticed that you have a very good reputation as being a guy, once you got to the Senate, who gets his nose to the grindstone, who who spends a lot of time studying the issues. You take things seriously. You're getting good high marks from the people that work with you. But my question is, you're relatively new to the Washington, D.C. scene, which actually may be a good thing.
That's a huge plus, by the way.
Yeah. But I'm wondering, just on a personal level, should that phone call come, do you feel that you are ready to be one heartbeat away from the presidency?
You know, I made a decision a couple months ago not to even talk about the vice presidential issue in any context. When people have tried to ask numerous different ones, and I just decided not to talk about it anymore. That Governor Romney deserves the space to take this issue on, and he's going to make a great selection. He's always made good choices. So.
All right. Well, you knew that I had to try, and you appreciate that. You know, that's my job. But I do greatly appreciate you being here. Very briefly, while we have you, tell us about the book.
Well, the book is really an homage to the American dream, and I tell it through the story of my parents and my grandfather. The American dream for them became the desire to leave us better off than they were, the desire to give us the chance to do all the things they didn't have a chance to do. And that's what the book details.
Yeah.
Their life leading into mine and the opportunities I've had because I'm an American son.
Right. Well, listen, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. And thank you for sending those power crews up from Florida. We need all the help we can get right
Thanks,
now.
Senator.
Yeah, that's right. They're on the way.
All right. Thanks a lot. Senator Marco Rubio, Republican from Florida, joining us here.